Hey, hello everybody. My name is Rory Maloney. I go by Mr. Maloney, Rory, Mr. M. Whichever you prefer to call me is fine with me. Um, Pretty much, I'm going to be going over the importance of indigenous perspectives in environmental science. Um, a little about me is that I've grown up on the Central Coast my whole entire life, and I love it here, but it has a huge history of indigenous people, and especially in the environmental area. Um, Something me and my little brother love to go do is look for arrowheads. Um, it's something that's amazing to see because it was crafted so long ago and with such precision, and it really highlights the abilities and the systems that the indigenous people of the area were able to create and utilize. So, very interesting to see and fun to take a dive into. So, an overview of what we'll be going over today is first of all, we're going to be doing some article reviews at the end of this little lecture here, and I'm going to have you all pair up in some breakout rooms um, in the Zoom call, and I'll be explaining this a little later. First, I'll go over a article with you and kind of help you understand what I'm looking for and what I want to see from you, and I'll help explain that. But firstly, I want to highlight the importance of indigenous knowledge systems. Uh, can also refer to it as IKS for short, but I want to highlight the deep-rooted knowledge that indigenous people have and the understanding they have of the natural world. I want to discuss some of the ways these systems have evolved over thousands of years through history and stayed operating throughout history and benefited the environment throughout history. As well as I want to emphasize the sustainable living and um, relationship that the indigenous people have with nature. Um, I think a core part of this lesson is going to be figuring out how we can take these things that the indigenous people have shown us and left us and try and learn from them and learn how we can apply these to our modern society and try and figure out how these practices worked, and as well as just understanding and appreciating the importance of them. So, I'd also like to ask you guys, um, elaborating a little more on that, what are some of the ways you guys personally participate in bettering the environment? It's like recycling, upcycling clothes. I know that's really popular. Um, I like to call this carbon consciousness, which would be like riding a bike, walking, taking the bus, carpooling, kind of trying to reduce your carbon footprint in this day and age, which might not be easy, but I know some of us that do actively think about that, and I'd love to hear it. But we'll get to that in a minute. So we're gonna be reviewing the different methods used by indigenous people, and once again, we'll try and figure out some good ways that we can apply these to our everyday lives. Um, I know one of the examples we use in here is the Three Sisters. We'll get to that a little later, but this is a farming technique. And when I say farming, I mean like something that could be done at home in a little planter box, a really pretty small area. So as long as there's a little sunlight, water, stuff like that, might be something that could be practiced. But I just want to ask you guys too, is there anyone that would like to share some of the ways that they participate in keeping the environment healthy? Like just like the examples I listed before, maybe even just especially the carpooling one. But at the end of this lesson, if anybody does want to share right now, I'll be adding on bonus points if that encourages you at all. But okay, this is where I would let the students talk. But, okay, so I want to explore the purpose of this lesson. So overall, umbrella of these notes I have written here is that we want to figure out what the indigenous people did that worked so well to maintain and sustain the environment, and what they did to nurture their land that they used to keep it healthy, and try and figure out some of the methods and their traditional farming techniques, water conservation, or the use of natural resources. A huge problem today is that we are depleting our natural resources. So what were they doing to not deplete them? We're going to discuss, how these methods can be adapted or inspired in modern lifestyles, like I said, urban gardening, sustainable resource use. So just a quick example of this that may not directly correlate to indigenous practices, but if you take, I don't know, maybe some of you have tried this, lettuce. If you cut the bottom off of lettuce, you can actually directly plant that and water it and grow a whole new head of lettuce. So I mean, just stuff like that rather than throwing it out, trying to encourage, just some new ways for you guys to brainstorm and discuss how we can incorporate things like this into our daily routines. So, but besides that, we're going to be exploring the combination of indigenous knowledge and environmental science. So in some of the articles we review, they have their techniques of how they preserved the land they used, but how they also kept the water on the land, how they preserved their water sources, as well as the different farming techniques they had to be efficient and to utilize their space to the best of their ability, and be efficient overall, as well as non-wasteful, which is very good. But we're going to also understand how indigenous perspectives can contribute to contemporary environmental issues like carbon consciousness. We need to take a look at that and understand that sometimes we need to work to try and figure out more efficient ways to travel, to overall live, pretty much. And then we're gonna go ahead and in some of the articles we're going to be reading some excerpts from Native authors on environmental practices and discuss the importance of integrating these perspectives into modern science, and see one thing we also have to recognize is that obviously we're not living in a period of that these people were living in. It's quite different technology, for example, a lot more people. So there is a difference between modern techniques and methods that do work, but we want to take a look and see if we could implement, parts of these indigenous knowledge systems or kind of some of their models, and just see if there's anything that we could do to better make our methods a little more efficient, a little more environmentally friendly. And then we'll go ahead and analyze the importance of the indigenous perspectives and see whether or not, once again, if we can go ahead and implement it into our daily lives. So that's pretty much the purpose of this lesson. We're going to go ahead and be analyzing the contributions of indigenous knowledge to sustainable practices. We're going to evaluate case studies on environmental science, as well as we're going to take a deep look into what these case studies are actually showing us about the different techniques that are used, trying to figure out why they worked, what made them so efficient? How did they come up with it? Is one of the more um, curious things for me. I would say. I mean, I always think about this as just the sheer amount of, I mean, for lack of a better word, smartness that these people were using to create these systems that were sustainable and being able to live off them. But so, and then towards the end of this, you'll be creating a mini presentation. I say presentation, but really you're going to go into breakout rooms, and I'm going to have you each pick an article. There's also a YouTube video. I like the YouTube video. So it's very good. They're all very good. But you're going to go ahead and read these case studies or watch, and then you're going to try and think of different ways. We'll get to this in a minute here, actually, but there's some questions I have for you and some key terms I'm looking for. But we're gonna, I mean, like I said, the main thing is try and see if we can fit these things into our everyday lives and lifestyles, and see in this modern day and age if we can improve anything and see what could be better. So these are the essential questions I really want everyone in class today to be thinking about. I haven't decided yet. I might post these on Canvas and have you read a brief excerpt, but I think the presentation will be enough. I just want to make sure that everyone really has a good grasp on these, but pretty much we're going to think of these throughout the presentation. First question is, how do indigenous perspectives on the environment differ from those of the mainstream scientific community? So like I said, we live in a different time than some of these indigenous groups lived in. A lot more people, a lot more technology, a lot more, I don't want to say science, because there was a lot of science that went into these systems that the indigenous people used, but I would say more chemicals. There's more compounds and substances that we have nowadays, so I want you guys to think of that. I want us to think about what we can learn from indigenous environmental practices. What are some of your biggest takeaways from these articles? What most intrigues you? What really struck your interest, made you go, whoa, I wonder how they did that. What was that? Oh, that might work really well today. So, and the third question is, how can the integration of indigenous knowledge improve current environmental strategies? So kind of think about some of our current practices, how we mass produce a lot of food, and if there's any better way that we can be preserving our natural resources. What was working for them? Is there ways of farming that are more efficient, that we can put crops on top of each other, next to each other, works a little better, it's more efficient. So, and then here are some key terms and concepts. Just pay attention to these. These are just key to this lesson, but so we want to think about indigenous knowledge systems and what they are, what specifically made these work, and kind of just how these are so efficient and what worked, what didn't. And then we want to think of environmental stewardship, kind of being conscious of, what's going on, really thinking about